Yeah, in itself, quite funny.
Yeah,
Has it been
absolutely.
stable so far?
No, totally not stable. An absolute roller coaster. So essentially, what we've built at Aether is this enterprise grade infrastructure for enterprise GPU compute marketplace.
Mark, to wrap it up, what is it that you're mostly excited about in the foreseeable kind of short-term future of, let's say, a year from now? Hey, Mark. First of all, welcome to our sort of founders Q&A session, and thank you for agreeing to do this.
No worries. Thank you very much for having me, George.
Before we dive deeper into Aether and what you guys are building up there, can you perhaps walk us through your background? What were you doing before crypto?
Yeah, so maybe a non-traditional path, but I think a lot of people in crypto have very non-traditional backgrounds. So I actually started in infrastructure building, right, which is somewhat relevant. My first roles were on big infrastructure projects in the oil and gas space from an engineering and project management perspective. I did that for the first 6 years of my career, working in some of the most remote places in the world, right, in the middle of the desert, in the middle of the ocean. I spent number of years on ships doing kind of marine civil engineering and dredging work, a whole bunch of really interesting stuff. Very much an adventure, but after about 6 or 7 years, I realized that I wanted a little bit more stability. Funnily enough, for me, stability meant becoming an entrepreneur. So incredibly naive, I think, in that sense, but I did really love it. So I founded my first company. My first company was actually a biotech company. I developed a series of kind of stretchy sensors that had medical applications. They could be incorporated into bandages, garments, and other medical devices. And I raised the money. I had kind of a divergent path in front of me at that time. I could head to maybe the startup ecosystems of New York or the Bay Area, or I could head to China, get closer to manufacturing, and maybe reduce the iteration cycle, speed up the engineering innovation cycle for these sensors, and maybe get to market quicker. And I chose to move to China. So I headed off to Beijing. In retrospect, probably should have moved to Shenzhen. That's where all the kind of factories are. But I didn't know anyone in Shenzhen. I was just a young kid. So I moved to Beijing, raised some more money and worked on that project for a couple more years before exiting. And during my time in biotech, I realized that infrastructure was definitely a passion. I liked the scale of the project. I liked the problems that infrastructure addresses. And I started looking for some interesting projects to be a part of. I started working on the Tencent Cloud Gaming Network with a bunch of really switched on engineers. We were looking at tackling some of the kind of scalability bottlenecks associated with their network, some of the performance bottlenecks. And it was really interesting stuff. I think for those of you that maybe don't know, or George, if you don't know, cloud gaming is essentially the delivery of performance GPU cloud, right? In particularly low latency environments. And it was really this project that kind of identified for me the need or the potential for decentralized cloud to address some of those bottlenecks. And that was kind of the genesis of Aether. So essentially myself and a couple of those engineers, we spun Aether out about a year later. We started scaling across Southeast Asia. We started scaling across Latin America. In the beginning, very gaming focused, right? The solution we had was very gaming focused, addressing kind of market entry and cloud publishing and giving game developers access to users that maybe or markets that didn't have the appropriate hardware to enjoy their game experience. And we realized pretty quickly that this kind of high performance GPU cloud had a lot of relevance to the AI industry as well. So we started structuring some AI products within our stack. And to be honest, the rest is history. The AI craze kind of came along, and things have been pretty mental ever since.
It's funny you mentioned that you were looking for stability, and that search for stability led you to crypto, which is, yeah, in itself quite funny.
Yeah,
Has it been
absolutely.
stable so far?
No, totally not stable. An absolute roller coaster of emotion. Um, yeah, I think entrepreneurship on its own is incredibly unstable, and pairing that with crypto is definitely not what my wife would call stable. Um, so it's been fun.
If you compare it to your previous occupation, however, when you were back in the days when you were working on these large scale infrastructure uh, projects, is it like for sure, like being a founder wouldn't be as stable as working for someone, but like if you compare your current sort of like day-to-day responsibilities to what it was back then, is it more, at least in order to say, or yeah.
Yeah, I would say that it's a different form of stability, right? I had uh, I used to have the ability to kind of shut off, like when you're earning a salary, the expectations. I'm not going to say I was ever kind of a 9 to 5 sort of person.
Right.
I was always very very driven and pushing as really hard as I could. Um, I used to frustrate my early managers quite a lot, but at least there was the opportunity I felt to kind of switch off. Right now, I don't very much feel that I have anywhere near as much autonomy with my time. My time is very much spent with my team. It's spent with external parties and investors, and so there's a stability there that I'm definitely sacrificing the stability of my own time. But on the flip side of that, I think we're building something pretty great, and we're going to be very present for a very long time in one of the most interesting and exciting industries on the planet, which is kind of this GPU infrastructure, particularly as it relates to kind of AI and gaming. So I think we've built something incredibly stable. I think I've traded the stability of maybe the the foundation of my career for the stability of my kind of daily schedule. But I think that's a trade that I'm very willing to make, particularly during the bull market and the
Yeah.
rapid pace of development and evolution that we have in the AI sector.
Yeah, Mark, let's dive right into it. What have you guys built, and what are you guys continue to building? What is Aethir? Can you please dumb it down for people who might not be as familiar with the whole DePIN narrative? And yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I think to best understand what we do, it's always good to look at the problem that we address first, right? So
Right.
one of the biggest problems that we address is that there's this fundamental global enterprise GPU scarcity, right? It's driven by this sustained buy pressure from some of the biggest tech companies in the world and a somewhat limited capacity for the largest chipset providers to produce these chips every year to satisfy that demand, right? And that that's not going anywhere. There's a number of reasons I can talk about later with regards to complexity of AI models and the advancement of compute infrastructure, but that scarcity is not really going anywhere, right? Um, and Aether is really looking to address this. However, what we realized was that it's not just a scarcity problem; it's also an efficiency problem. There's a large amount of these resources that don't just go and get dropped into an AWS, right? They get bought and purchased for internal use cases, right? And actually, if you look at utilization rates across enterprise GPUs, particularly, for example, in the States, average utilization for these boxes is between 15 to 18%, right? So you actually have over 80% in many cases of underutilization of these critical resources. But because they were really bought by companies for internal use cases, they don't necessarily have the infrastructure to show those boxes to the rest of the world, to show those to the demand side of the market. And this is a critical sort of issue. So essentially, what we've built at Aether is this enterprise grade infrastructure for enterprise GPU compute marketplace. right? Where data centers, tech companies, enterprises, crypto mining organizations can expose their GPUs to our infrastructure and earn rewards as a result. And then on the other side of that marketplace, you have the compute buyers, right? And those compute buyers can then purchase that compute to pretty much scale and deliver their compute product, extremely competitive, and also at a scale and level of availability that our competitors can't just to match.
So let me see if I got this right. On one side, we have sort of dormant, underused GPU capacity that's just sitting there latent. On the other hand, we have a kind of like a parabolically increasing demand for GPU capacity, which isn't going anywhere because AI and all that is just running wild. And you guys are building a bridge. So if I have underused capacity, I can just ship it to the marketplace, and someone who needs it can then buy it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And where does because you guys are also building your blockchain, so can you tell us why did you decide to go this route?
Yeah, I think building in Web3 was a really strategic decision for us, right? It wasn't, I wouldn't say we're traditional, I guess we're not native crypto guys originally, right? We kind of took a look at the problem we were trying to address and the different types of solutions that were available. And we realized that Web3 and the blockchain and the utility of that ecosystem was actually technically the best way to solve this problem, right? It's not about slapping a token on something and calling it a day. This is a real technical solution to a global kind of macro issue that we believe is best solved with the blockchain, right? And essentially, that's really for two, I think, key reasons, right? First is the scalability. With the blockchain, we can create infrastructure that allows us to provide this permissionless ecosystem where users can come and onboard their hardware within our network. And as a result of the blockchain, they can prove the work, right, that they do on this ledger in a truly transparent, kind of trustless manner, right? And what that allows us to do then is link smart contracts to that work, right? So they get rewarded for the work that they're able to prove that they've done, right? So you take trust out of the equation, right? Say, for example, you're having a new node operator stand up in a new region, and you were a Web2 company. The process, first of all, you'd have to buy that hardware yourself,
right?
Which is expensive. But let's just say you're doing it in a decentralized Web2 way, right? You need to stand up the infrastructure necessary for them to be paid, right? You need to structure the partnerships and the contracts that make that process possible. And then on top of that, you need to create some sort of like unique infrastructure for that person to ensure that they could feel comfortable that when they did work, they were going to get paid for it.
Right.
We take all of that difficulty out of the equation through the blockchain and the automation of these rewards, right? And that's kind of the key to unlocking scalability, right? Because as soon as you have trust, people are willing to contribute their hardware to the network. And if you pull all the guardrails off and you say anywhere in the world, you can contribute your hardware. We're not just limited to the regions where we have, fiat off ramps and connections to kind of the infrastructure. It really kind of makes that scalability exciting. So yeah, the blockchain for us just gave us the ability to build the type of company that we were hoping to be able to build in a way that gave us access to pretty much every piece of hardware that we'd want in an ideal situation to kind of onboard onto our network.
What type of blockchain are you building? Is it like a dedicated standalone solution, or are you building on top of an existing chain?
So we're building on top of an existing chain. We're building on Arbitrum. The decision process there was again, not too complex, right? It was a very simple sort of decision in many ways, right? So the first decision that we had was, okay, we have a base level of TPS that we need to meet. There's a certain amount of data that we generate for our real-time compute processing. Not everything's going to be on chain, but a certain amount does need to be on chain. As a result of that, we need to meet like a certain TPS.
Right.
Alongside that, we know roughly how many transactions and the gas fees that will be associated. So we need kind of high TPS and cheap gas, right? So that put us kind of in the layer two, maybe layer three category. But layer three weren't really a big option when we made the initial decision, or an alternative like Solana, right? When we were making the call originally, I think Solana had a couple of outages. They were kind of reputationally struggling at that point in time. So we said, okay, that, and also based on the fact that the development language is, I think they're Rust, and the majority of the EVM ecosystems of Solidity. We realized, okay, that's a bit of technical debt if we ended up building there and wanted to make a switch later. So we said, okay, let's go with a layer two, right? Let's build on an EVM compatible chain. The developer libraries, the capacity and availability of resources to support our build were better there. So we kind of isolated the layer two kind of question. And then we really kind of looked at the two big L2s that were kind of, I guess, somewhat new cycle, but also battle tested, robust, stable. And those were Arbitrum and ZK Sync, right? We really wanted to kind of partner with a layer two that had a strong ecosystem, that had a war chest, right? They were providing grants, they were supporting their community. They looked like they were on track to kind of do something really cool next cycle. And to be honest, the primary reason we switched, that we chose Arbitrum compared to ZK Sync, was just that there was a tiny, like a 1%. They used to say that ZK Sync was like 99% EVM compatible. And that like 1% was the only thing that kind of like split the difference between the two. So for us, it was a pretty simple, kind of predominantly business-led decision. But we're really happy with where we are. I think the Arbitrum team have been incredibly supportive. We're now, one of the bigger projects on their ecosystem. We did, a couple of Twitter spaces with them just recently. I think they've got a lot of really interesting AI and DePIN projects and gaming projects that they're building. And I think it's been really good to kind of work more closely with them.
And can you tell me where in the development roadmap the chain is, and perhaps when can we expect it to fully launch?
Yeah, so testnet's live now, right? Testnet's been going for about 3 or 4 months. I think we're in testnet phase 2. And the next step is mainnet, right? So we've been going through the process of testnet, of validating all of the automations and the smart contracts that we need to kind of deploy and reward work within the ecosystem. You would have seen that we did a big node sale recently that involves a certain participant that we call them the checker. The checker has jobs that they need to do within the ecosystem as well. So we're checking the checker framework and making sure the checkers are working. So we've been doing a lot, and it's been pretty busy, pretty hectic. But we're on track to look at kind of mainnet by the end of May, which is when essentially we'll transition from this testing environment, and everyone will be able to access and onboard into the Aethir ecosystem.
And you mentioned your node sale. It made headlines all over the industry. You guys raised like a whopping 65 million, I think, or somewhere around that number.
Yeah, we're I can't say we're double that, but we're at about 107 mil now.
Okay. And so can you explain to me how it works, like the sale itself, and is there room for further participation and how does it work in general?
Yep. All right. So I guess one of the interesting things, and I get asked this a lot, like, why did we do a node sale, right? And I think that's a really good question that not a lot of people maybe fully understand the logic behind it. It's easy to kind of look at that and say, okay, this is a fundraising activity, but actually, it definitely was, right. But alongside it was a very strategic decision for us, right, based on, I guess, the core competency that we have as a GPU compute network, right. We're very enterprise focused, right. So, kind of the difference between us and maybe other compute networks in the space is that Aethir only onboards enterprise grade compute, right? Enterprise grade GPUs that serve enterprise cloud clients that live in data centers or connected into kind of enterprise grade network infrastructure.
Right.
That's our sweet spot. That's the type of compute that big customers want. It's very, very difficult to, currently essentially impossible to aggregate consumer pods that live in kind of consumer households in a way that makes them suitable for enterprise compute buyers, right? Because you have these big service quality and uptime agreements that you have to meet, and it's really hard to convince a big company that Jimmy's GPU is not going to be switched off when he goes to bed, right? So it's a difficult sort of conundrum that those networks have. For us, we chose to be purely enterprise focused, right? And that meant that all of the GPUs, and it's still that way today, 100% of our GPUs are enterprise grade in data centers or, at least connected to kind of enterprise grade network infrastructure. The average consumer does not have access to those chips, right? So we're a DePIN, we're a network that's encouraging participation, and we have this great kind of active big community, but we also are kind of gating them from providing compute within our network. We're gating them from working in our network. And we didn't really like that. So we looked at our kind of roadmap, and we're on this kind of progressive road to decentralization, right? You can't decentralize everything day one, right? You have to increasingly decentralize over time. One of the things that we plan to decentralize later this year was the role of the checker, right? We always intended for that role to be decentralized and to offer that role to the community. Just like you can currently become a miner within the network, you could become a checker. So we realized we had this critical kind of deficit where we couldn't involve the community within our ecosystem. So we pulled the checker decentralization forward because the technical requirements to operate as a checker are really, really minimal. You just have to run a software package on your desktop PC, and it conducts work within the ecosystem. So this gave us this mechanism to allow our community to come in and operate and do meaningful work, right? And receive rewards without them having to, even have a high-end consumer GPU, right? I mean, if you want to contribute to kind of other big DePIN networks, you need to have maybe a 4090. That's like a $1,000 plus card, right? For us, you can contribute, you could do really meaningful work, and you can qualify for essentially 15% of our total token allocation. You can qualify for that if you just install a software package and you run and do work within the checker ecosystem. So that's the reason why we did it. Essentially, how the checker works, or maybe what the role of the checker is first, is the checker is the policeman within the network, right? So you've got all these GPUs, and you're trusting the GPUs to do work, right? You're giving them access to the blockchain. You're giving them the ability to record that work, and then that work that is recorded has the ability to be rewarded within the network, right? But you need a policeman. You need someone that double validates, right? That double checks that everything that's happening is true. Oh, my GPU is an H100. Well, let's just go double check that it's an H100. And you're not just telling it's an H100 so that you get like the extra rewards that a high performance chip gets access to. Oh, you say you've got this game installed, right? And that you're delivering it to this customer. Let's just double check that that's actually the case. And you're not instead telling us that you're delivering Cyberpunk 2077 when actually you're delivering Candy Crush, and you're essentially just pulling, higher compute rewards from the ecosystem. So you have this policeman that is constantly out there, heartbeat checking the network, right? Looking for these bad actors, looking for any, issues with collusion or fraud. And I just love the fact that we're able to give that role and that kind of important amount of work to the community. It's that kind of separation of police and state, you know? And I think that that's really cool. The fact that the community has the ability to essentially police the network is a really powerful message, I think, to the type to the world of the type of kind of community and the type of ecosystem that we're trying to build. So that's kind of what the checker does. And essentially, the sale was structured such that there were 100,000 of these checkers available, right? They were priced on a curve in tiers, right? And it was essentially a first come, first serve basis. I think one thing that we did that I really liked is what I can imagine happening in many circumstances, right? Is you do a node sale and you de-risk the node sale by pre-selling 10 million to uh, to institutions, right? And you give them a discount. You're like, okay, you guys have the cheaper node,
Yeah.
right? And we'll leave the more expensive nodes for retail. We didn't do that, right? Every tier at a minimum had 50% available for retail. So any price that was paid for by institutional capital was equally available for retail. So we didn't exclude any of our community. And that was kind of really, really cool, right? Because when retail was buying, right, they were kind of able to see, okay, smart money has priced up to kind of this point, right? And they could kind of use the DD in the research that maybe is not available to the average consumer, right? That would have been done by these institutions before they made their bet. So I thought it was a really cool structure. Of that 100,000, we've sold 67,000 of those to date. So 67% are done. The implied FDV of the sale puts Safe at around kind of 2.2 billion, which is pretty insane. I think, yeah, I think again, to be honest, the biggest takeaway for us at Aethir from this sale was the commitment that our community has to this project. Because you have to remember, right, when you're buying a node, you're not buying tokens. You're buying permission to work. Right. So if you buy the node and then you don't do anything with it, right, and you just like let it sit there, right, you won't get any rewards. You only get the rewards if you do the work. So you're essentially having people come and purchase nodes, you know, at non-insignificant pricing, right? And the rewards that they get from that are distributed over a 4-year period, right? And they only get them if they do the work for that 4 years. So these are highly committed individuals, right? 67,000 highly committed individuals that have bought into our ecosystem for a minimum of 4 years. And I think that's a really powerful message to us as a company, right? We need to recognize that our community kind of is asking a lot of us, right? They want us to be building strong for the next kind of 4 years. And I think it sends a pretty cool message to other projects out there that you know, the community are interested in doing work. If you can unlock the ability for them to do that work, they're ready to go. So that's pretty cool.
Mark, to wrap it up, what is it that you're mostly excited about in the foreseeable kind of short-term future of, let's say, a year from now?
Man, I feel like I'm thinking in weeks maximum.
Okay. Yeah. A year in crypto is like, yeah.
So I'll say 3 months, right?
Okay.
So obviously, I mentioned earlier we've got our TGE happening in May, right? End of May. That's 6 weeks away, right? Incredibly exciting time for us. Huge amount that we're doing. Some really, really big partnerships that we're announcing that'll be coming out within the next couple of weeks. I'm excited to see people's reactions to those, right? I don't think they're going to be expecting this level of partnership. So I think that's going to be very, very cool. And we have a big announcement actually that's happening next week at Token 2049 that is also, I think, going to blow people away. Yeah, I'll call it a new product line, right? You can read into that how you want, but it's going to be super, super cool. It unlocks a whole nother layer of cloud compute that I think people will find very, very, very interesting.
Okay, well, that's a bit of a teaser there. Mark, can you tell us where we can find you on socials?
Yeah, so you can find Aethir at Aethir Cloud on Twitter. My Twitter is what's my Twitter? I'm gonna say it. You're gonna have to
Yeah,
edit this out.
we can just include it in the caption.
Yeah, it's Mr. Rydon. Essentially, Mr. Rydon. Mr. Rydon. My middle name is Robert. So Mr. Mr. Rydon. And honestly, if you want to stay up to date with what we're doing at Aethir, follow our main Twitter account. Follow me. I give a little bit of like insight into our kind of daily operations and sometimes let things slip that I shouldn't. And then also we have our Discord, which I think is a really great community where we run a lot of interesting kind of events that the community really likes getting involved with.
Okay, well, thank you so much for this.
No worries. It's been my pleasure.